Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss the latest hand-wringing on gifts received by politicians. As The Guardian does a hit piece on Common Speaker Lindsay Hoyle, a gift of £100,000 to a Tory minister who then gives you a lucrative government contract is not the same as giving an MP a tie who gives nothing in return. But given that this is the way the media behave, downplaying actual corruption from the Tories whilst pearl clutching at everyone else, should all non-Tory parties basically advise their MPs just don't accept anything for fear of childish false equivalent stories. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So years ago, going back years, decades even, in the sort of John Major years, where his Conservative government was battling with sleaze, they're trying to clamp down on it within his party. He introduced the Nolan principles in order to set guidelines for how ministers should behave in order to avoid dodgy behaviour and the perception of dodgy behaviour. And I remember watching the news one day, and one Tory minister, I think it was David Miller, don't quote me on that, I think it was David Miller, coming away from some event or other, brandishing a biscuit at the assembled journalists, came over to them holding this biscuit up. "I've been given this biscuit and I shall of course be registering it," he said. It's like, but he was saying it to take the piss. Obviously, not only did the new rules at the time not require him to register a biscuit, nobody's got an issue with that. The central issue is we do not want politicians using their elected office, whether as local councillors or ministers of state, to do favours for people or organisations corruptly in return for gifts or donations. Nobody believes that even the sleaziest Tory would engage in corrupt behaviour for a bloody biscuit. What concerns us is when a minister of any party awards a lucrative government contract to someone and we're scratching our heads and going, why did they get it? And it turns out they donated to that party a few months ago. Or where some law or aspect of the budget is changed, which seems to suspiciously benefit a donor. These are the things to watch out for. And in some cases, there won't actually be any direct link. Correlation isn't causation. But it is important to avoid suspicion of corruption as well as actual corruption if we're going to restore trust in politics. For example, the Tory habit, going back to David Cameron, they did this a lot of times. There was no mistake in it. So they had this grift going on where they'd appoint a treasurer to the party. So, of course, a political party has a treasurer. Of course it does. But their treasurers will only last about 18 months, which is quite a short time. And there'd be a requirement that whoever became treasurer of the party would have to donate at least 3 million quid to the party themselves. And then after a year or two in the post, they would leave and get a seat in the House of Lords. This happened a lot, I think a good dozen times. This is where we have an issue. But The Guardian yesterday reporting on Lindsay Hoyle's 300 gifts over the past 4 years. Now, to me, if I'm going to be worried about a gift, there are a couple of things which have to be true. The first is the gift has to be of substantial value. Even dodgy MPs are not children. You're not going to bribe them with a biscuit. Is the gift substantial enough to potentially invite a corrupt quid pro quo? Second, is there any evidence that the recipient of the donations used their elected office to do something which might have benefited the donor? Now, if the answer to either question is no, there's no fuss to be made. So what are some of the gifts listed in this article for Hoyle? And bear in mind, Hoyle's not a minister, right? He can't award public contracts. It's very difficult to know how Hoyle could use his position to corruptly benefit anyone. But in theory, he might be able to do some things. So then you look at the gifts and you go, okay, so he received gifts of ties, cufflinks, gifts for his parrots, or basically peanuts, bottles of alcohol. None of these things are an issue. Like, if we ever get senior politicians who will corrupt their office for a bottle of plonk or a packet of peanuts, we have got bigger problems. I mean, okay, in theory, cufflinks could be very expensive, as could the decorative ornament described. However, as there's a value limit on what Hoyle can accept without registering it, I don't think this is the case. Because The Guardian didn't mention the value of any of these gifts, which means none of them could have been more than £300. In fact, had the gifts been of substantial value, yeah, the article would absolutely have quoted those figures. It didn't. It presented the cumulative cost of travel and accommodation for foreign trips, because that's registered. But are we to say politicians shouldn't represent Britain on the world stage? If they're invited to some event, should they not go? Or are we saying that the cost should be fronted by the British taxpayer? Should Lindsay Hoyle, if he gets invited to some meeting in India, for example, should he say, well, they've offered to pay it, should we get the British taxpayer to pay it instead? No, you can argue that. That's fine. But if you're going to argue that, make the case for that. If we want the UK represented on the world stage, politicians are going to have to travel. We don't expect them to travel in the luggage hold. And government visits, they're covered by the public purse. Of course they are. Ministers do that, but not non-ministers. So someone's going to pay for it. I'm not sure most people in the country, especially during the cost of living crisis, want to increase expenditure on politicians travelling the world and staying in nice hotels. And nowhere in the article did it suggest any link either between any gift Hoyle had accepted and some dubious favour he seems to have done for the person giving the donation or the gift. You know, we had this last year with the Taylor Swift tickets for ministers, didn't we? And it's like, okay, they're of more substantial value. Sure, absolutely. Has anyone suggested that Taylor Swift or her management team got anything out of our government decisions? Has she been given a government contract or anything? Has the law been changed to favour her? No. And you expect this of the Tory press. But when you've got outlets like The Guardian, it's supposed to be one of the sensible ones, doing the same thing, you wonder what the thinking behind it is. See, when you have a pop at an MP for accepting the gift of a tie or some chocolates, you are effectively saying this is the same as accepting 3 million quid in return for a seat in our parliament. They're not the same. They're not even just different scales of harm. Like I say, if the media are going to keep doing this, though, maybe we do need to just tighten the rules up. Because although you can argue, nobody would suggest any MP will whore themselves out for a tie. You could still argue, nor do they have to keep the tie. You know, change the rules so that all material gifts are the property of whichever body the politician represents. You know, the Westminster Parliament in this case, and they retain ownership. So Hoyle gets a tie. So he gets a tie. Okay, I accept this on behalf of my office. And he can wear the tie. He can wear the tie in his duties as speakers. But then, when he leaves his position, he's no longer the speaker. He presents the tie he puts it in the House of Commons wardrobe of gifts or something. And then the next speaker can use it if they want. So that, you know, a bit like a Tesco staff jacket. Because I think stories that conflate actual corruption with harmless gifts are damaging. Like, it feeds into a narrative of they're all on the take, which is like, no, if you can't show that they did anything corruptly in return, it was just a gift. And some of these gifts, like pissing peanuts, for goodness sake. But the media, they need their cheap digs. There's no point in complaining about them. They're going to carry on doing it. They need it for the clicks, don't they? So take the sting out the tail. Maybe just stop all material gifts being possible. You're not going to be able to stop someone like giving you lunch or travel or accommodation, because you need, those are just part of like meetings, particularly across the world. But that isn't lasting. That's not a lasting gift. And the public probably wouldn't want, you know, if you were to say to the public, okay, well, we don't have, we could get the taxpayer to pay for it. Would you like that? I think the public would probably say, no, let them pay for it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.